Right. Peace. Back again with chapter 9 of The Road from Orion. There came and looked him in the face an angel beautiful and bright, and that he knew it was a fiend, this miserable night. Love, Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Within 30 seconds, I had recovered from the nausea of vomiting and regained full consciousness. I actually felt good, and so did John, but I was disturbed when I could not find the snake anywhere. We decided to sit on the deck and discuss what happened. I soon learned that the reason I never saw John was because he had made a series of rapid transformations into inanimate objects, moving from Pagani's violin to one of Geraldine's gems, to the mariner's crossbow, to the mask of the rock musicians. Space had actually dissolved and reformed for each transformation, making change possible. His mind intrigued by his new world of novelty and evolution, John now viewed both the inanimate and the animate as living. Seeing the future and past as an unlimited, free interchange, ripe with potential for change, John had stood on a ground of unconditional energy that dissolved from one form from another, only to recrystallize into another. The powder also made John talk about trivia that I did not know he knew. Everything came out of his mouth exactly the way I sensed it. Scientist that Lucia was, she listed every detail of our trip, telling us that we were conscious in the subatomic world, that we had experienced quantum consciousness and non-locality. Although we never knew it, John and I were at the same location in different forms, while connected by thought at all times. Apparently, we had actually experienced the knowledge that O'Keeffe had unconsciously when she painted the red poppy. Our minds had enfolded into the music to witness Rachmaninoff's and Paganini in the madness of their creativity, to see Kiss in concert, and to sense Coleridge's deepest intuition about the dark side of beauty and love. And it masked something frightening. It was this particular insight that was the focus of John and Lucia's discussion. Lucia made notes as John turned the pages of Coleridge's rhyme to the part where the mariner kills the albatross. He studied the text quietly and flipped to the poem, Christabel. The white albatross and Geraldine, he said, were messengers of death in disguise. Yes, Lucia, taking notes. The same disguise, whiteness, beauty. Glancing at her notes, she added, if Geraldine appeared as the beast she was, Christabel and her father may have had a warning, a chance to escape. They were attracted to her beauty like the moth is to the light. This idea of beauty masking the beast can be found in many works of literature and art, John said. The poet Rilke or Reich wrote the That beauty is nothing but the beginning of terror, and every angel is a terrifying, deadly bird of the soul. Like the albatross, I mused. My senses were right. The albatross was something dangerous, and the mariner knew this too, so he shot the deadly bird. No wonder Coleridge used opium. How else could he live with his own creative inspiration? Or maybe he was using opium to tap into his mind, to step back and watch himself. Whatever the circumstances, the inescapable reality is that killing the white albatross that made the wind blow resulted in the death of the crew. No wind, no new life, no stork, just death. Now, Shakespeare's Tempest inspired Edgar Allan Poe's Masque of Red Death, John said, pausing just long enough to add it to a list he was making. Poe's story is about a horrible plague that is killing everyone in Prince Prospero's kingdom. Prospero decides to quarantine 1,000 of his best friends in his abbey. So he barricades everyone inside, including himself, and provides an extravagant party with wine, women, song, and dance. Poe made a point of writing that beauty was there on the inside with them, while the Red Death roamed outside. Lucille was listening intently. So we have the same theme again of beauty and the beast, which united is death, she said. Yes, but there is more, said John. Everyone was outside, or was inside rather. The bizarre Prospero decided to have a mass ball in his imperious suite of 7 chambers that were arranged so that each room only became visible as you progress from the first to the last. So you had his maze of chambers with sharp turns, said John, circling his right arm to indicate a spiral. The first chamber was blue, the second purple, then green, orange, white, violet, and finally the last chamber was a deep blood red. This chamber was a huge ebony clock whose hideous chimes could stop the party, the laughter, and the musicians from playing. John was at his best, easily remembering all the nuisances of the story, the plot, the colors, the sounds, the details. Watching him, we could see how he savored twisted plots and strange characters. He seemed to be a man caught in the web of his own storytelling. He boldly acted out the role of the Prince Prospero. Then the wide-eyed stare of convulsive lust and death might have when it stalks living victims. Might have when it stalks living victims. Oh. After the clock's last chime, said John, standing to pull his t-shirt over his head, hunching like some deformed creature, a masked presence plodding through the first blue chamber. The party crowd soon noticed the masked stranger, their surprise turning to horror as they recognized the tall, gaunt visitor, shrouded in a hood, with his vest spotted with blood, and wearing a gruesome mask that resembled a screaming specter. John talked quickly as he slowly pulled his t-shirt off his face, now imitating Prospero. Insulted because he recognized the mask as that of the Red Death, Prospero quickly ordered the revealer to seize the guest and unmask him, but everyone was afraid. The Red Death then traveled from the blue chamber to the red chamber with the enraged Prospero following, his dagger drawn and raised to kill. Everyone was paralyzed with terror. John paused briefly. Finally, Prospero confronted the hooded figure, gave a cry of horror, and dropped dead. When the revealer approached the intruder, There was no tangible form present, only the mask and shroud. Soon all were dead, and the Red Death victorious. Lucia stood up, walked into the living room, selected a large book from her shelf, and returned. "Have you ever seen the sketch of Goya's?" she said, placing the book before us. We looked at the dismal drawing of a cloaked figure, the dark face unseen and shrouded, with the right hand holding a smiling mask as it stalked fleeing, panicking soldiers. Goya had drawn the classic representation of death, awesome in its indifference. We stared fiercely at the nightmarish sketch, a preparatory drawing for Dispartes, noticing that Goya and Poe shared the same idea of the image of death. I imagined that if the shroud were drawn back, I would not be able to peer into the maddening eyes. John must have been thinking the same, for his eyes were glazed with knowledge of something horrible. For a moment, he looked frenzied, disturbed, and conscious horror in his dark expression. Lucia just stood next to John, staring silently at the black and white drawing from Goya's Black Period. To me, it did not seem unreasonable for one to prefer beauty over horror. But why the deceit, the masquerade, the shroud? Are we so fragile that we cannot look truth in the face? Do we need to be shielded by images of beauty? I did not have an answer, and I did not want one, but Lucia and John were hounds on the scent of death. Poe's stories reminds me of Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, said John, closing the book. When he said heart, I cringed, remembering the vast blank eye of the sickening sun and how it had throbbed like a panting heart. My chair scraped across the wooden deck as I stood too quickly, springing for the adjustment knob on the sunshade to make sure it blocked out the stalking yellow eye in the sky. Within seconds, I was safe from the sunlight, but not from my own thoughts, which kept coming back to me like bad reflexes, magnifying my fear. I knew I had to question why I was having these panic attacks, but now was not the time. Trying to calm myself with the idea that fear is only a projection of the mind, which itself is an illusion, I sat down, almost missing the chair. John noticed my folly and sensed my fear, but he passed it off as a reaction from the white powder. Lucia gazed coldly at me, almost through me with her systematic eyes. She then made several quick notations in the last section of her notebook, as if she were writing a schizophrenic diagnosis. Actually, said John, the way Prospero dies is similar to the way Conrad's tragic hero Kurtz dies in the African jungle. I remember that Kurtz had journeyed deep into the African wilderness, questing for ivory. His greed driving him further into the heart of Africa, making him mad, compelled as he was to unveil some hidden inner truth. Nurtured by a wild tribal queen who was right at home in his hut that he encircled with blackened, shrunken heads preserved dry on stakes, Kurt submitted his primal urges, becoming a murderous headhunter. The story ends up with the ailing Kurtz in the heart of Africa's wilderness, unrepentant and rational, waiting calmly for death. Kurt's soul had gone mad, said John. He had the time to look into his soul, and it drove him mad. Some spiritual journey, I thought, very much like what happened to Nerval, who also wanted the secret of life. Then I saw a dark energy of some kind dashing at me from all directions as if I was receiving station. Tiny particles of light beamed down towards me at a great speed. Atoms teleported from somewhere. Information, memories, trivia pouring into my mind. Nerval's doctor advised him to keep a written account of his madness, which he did in his book, Aurelia. The account centers on Nerval's love for a divine golden lady and his intention to unveil the secret of life. Euralia is the Latin word for golden. Like the crazed Kurtz, Nerval was mad, at least according to our modern psychiatrist standards. I glanced at Lucille, who seemed to be watching me with the cold-hearted scrutiny of a rattlesnake ready to strike. Her eyes gripped mine with an intensity that I resented. I felt like an animal trapped in a cage, just waiting for a fatal dose of her white powder. She knew my mind was frantic with thoughts and I did not generate, rather. Sure, the sun made me paranoid, but so did Lucia's obsession with the gold and John's compulsion to tell stories. Finally, Lucia dropped her gaze into her notebook, her pen striking another notation in the back with the cold abandon of a coroner performing an autopsy. At that moment, John said, Kurtz had no faith, no fear, no restraints, so he looked death in the eye. His head tilted upward. John gazed at the majestic mountains, the peaks pinnacled against the sharp horizons, stark blue like fingers clutching the sky. Yet the sun slipped indifferently into the earth, bent on journeying through time and space as the sky darkened. For a change, Lucia was writing in the front of her notebook, but listening to John. I was still uneasy and troubled. Kurt saw an image that filled him with terror, an image that made him cry out and made him hate. John stood up, his body stiffening like an epileptic, his head thrown back, his arms thrashing the air. Caught off guard, Lucia dropped her tablet and I almost crumbled into the fading sunlight. Then, just as abruptly, he extended his arm out like Christ on the cross. I expected his hands to start bleeding at any moment, but instead he stared at the dying sun, speaking at full volume as if he were exorcising the devil from it. The horror, he hollered. I held my breath, and the tension only eased when John bowed his head and murmured, these were the last words of Kurtz, who glimpsed a hidden truth, the same truth Prince Prospero witnessed. Pulling herself together immediately, Lucia picked up her tablet. John, she said quickly, spare us the drama. John's spontaneity did not bother me as much as Kurt's words did. Kurtz had seen something unspeakable, something that he might have shared at the moment of his death, something that could have helped others understand life. But he died with his prophecy. Soon I would learn that Joseph Conrad's greatness, his humanity, was that he did not let his hero Kurtz reveal his dark vision. Alright, y'all. Peace, kings and queens. We'll be back with chapter 10 next time we peer into the road from Orion. Thank you. Hey, please don't forget to like and subscribe and help the big brother out, please. Thank you.